I knew it was going to be a bad morning the second I saw her floral visor bobbing toward my driveway. Her name was Carol Mattingly. President of the HOA, tyrant of the cul-de-sac, and self-declared trash queen. She was holding a clipboard like it was a weapon, and had that permanent squint like she was trying to spot a crime from 50 yards away. I was halfway through strapping a tie-down on my trash bin when she called out, "Patrick. We need to talk." I stood up slow, wiped my hands on my jeans, and met her at the edge of the driveway. "Morning, Carol, what's the issue now?" She gave a tight smile and tapped her clipboard. "It's your garbage service. You're not using Everclean disposal." "That's the HOA-approved provider." "Yeah, I know," I said. "I have a commercial hauling contract with Ridgeway Waste. Had it for years. Better rates, picks up twice a week, and they don't leave my bins in the middle of the road." Carol's nostrils flared like I'd insulted her favorite casserole. "That's not acceptable. The HOA signed a bulk contract with Everclean. It's required now. You'll need to cancel your current arrangement." I crossed my arms. "Required? That wasn't in the last meeting minutes," she blinked. "Well, it was passed by executive decision. Unanimous vote by the board. That board includes you, your sister-in-law, and the guy who lives 3 doors down that no one's seen sober since Easter," I said. "Nice little democracy you're running," she stiffened. "Regardless, it's binding. If you keep using Ridgeway, we'll have to issue a violation." I raised an eyebrow. "You can't force me into a private contract I never agreed to. That's basic contract law." Her lips thinned. "You'll be hearing from us." She turned and stormed off down the sidewalk like she was marching to war. I just shook my head and rolled my bin back behind the fence. The thing is, I wasn't bluffing. My contract with Ridgeway was locked in for another year. And more importantly, I'd already done my homework. That evening, I dug through the HOA's bylaws again. No mention of mandatory trash services. No amendment filed. No resident vote. Just a backroom deal Carol made with Everclean, probably for a kickback or some free premium service she'd conveniently never declared. I wasn't about to roll over for that nonsense. So I printed out my contract, highlighted the key sections, and stapled it to a copy of the HOA's own bylaws. Then I delivered it to Carol's mailbox with a sticky note that just said, "Legally unenforceable, stop trying." That should have been the end of it, but with Carol. It was just the beginning. HOA story, HOA stories, homeowners association stories. The next morning, I was on the roof replacing a cracked vent cap when I noticed a white sedan circling the block. It slowed as it passed my house, then turned back around and parked across the street. A man in a navy polo stepped out, clipboard in hand, and walked straight up to my property line. He didn't ring the bell, just snapped a few photos and scribbled something down. I climbed off the roof and walked up behind him. "Can I help you?" He turned, startled. "Oh, Tom Sheffield. Everclean disposal. HOA sent me to document non-compliant properties." "Non-compliant?" I asked, glancing at the camera he'd just tucked under his arm. "You mean people who didn't sign up for your service?" He adjusted his collar. "It's required under the HOA's bulk contract. We're authorized to issue transition notices." "Transition notices," I repeated. "You realize I have a commercial hauling contract already in place. You're trespassing, by the way." He took a step back. "I was told this property didn't have an active service. You were told wrong." He muttered something about checking with the board and walked off briskly, nearly tripping over the curb. I watched him drive off, took a picture of his license plate, and made a mental note to call Ridgeway to confirm no unauthorized requests had been made on my account. Later that afternoon, I got a letter taped to my door, hand-delivered. Not mailed. It was an urgent notice of violation, claiming I was in breach of community waste management compliance. No signature, no HOA letterhead, just a typed letter with vague threats about fines and municipal code alignment. That was a mistake. I scanned the letter, checked for any cited codes, none, and then called my friend Karen. She's a municipal compliance officer for the county, and we'd gone to high school together. I read her the letter over the phone. "Sounds like they're bluffing," she said. "There's no such alignment. We don't mandate private waste contracts. In fact, that could border on coercion if they're pressuring residents without a vote. Want to swing by and confirm that officially?" She laughed. "I'll bring coffee." By the time she pulled up, I'd already set up a table on the lawn with my documents spread out my Ridgeway agreement, a copy of the HOA bylaws, and a list of other neighbors I knew hadn't switched to Everclean. Karen reviewed the papers, took photos with her work phone, and nodded slowly. "I'm going to file an inquiry with the county," she said. "This looks like a case of unauthorized regulatory impersonation. If they used county language to pressure people, that's a problem. Could it go further? If they sent false notices and tried to enforce them with fines, yeah, that's fraud. Especially if they're benefiting financially." We both looked down the street toward Carol's house, the only one with a brand new Everclean Deluxe bin out front, still gleaming like it had never seen a bag of garbage in its life. That evening, I canvassed a few neighbors. Not to stir drama, just to gather information. I started with the Wangs across the street, then the Patels, then down to Mr. Rayburn, the retired Navy man who spent most afternoons carving wooden ducks in his garage. Each one had a similar story. Carol had told them the trash switch was mandatory. Most weren't thrilled about it, but they didn't want to deal with the hassle. A few had even paid early compliance fees, $50 here, $75 there supposedly to cover container upgrades. I asked Mr. Rayburn if he'd been given a receipt. "Nope," he said, holding up a wrinkled envelope with the word HOA scribbled in marker. "Just dropped this in her mailbox like she said." I felt my jaw tighten. That wasn't just shady. That was theft. Over the next 2 days, I collected statements handwritten, signed from 7 households. I made copies of every one and attached them to a formal complaint that I filed with the county's Office of Regulatory Oversight. Karen fast-tracked it. Then came the bombshell. 3 days later, a county investigator named Adam Juneau contacted me. He'd been assigned the case and had already discovered something damning. Everclean wasn't officially contracted with the HOA. In fact, no contract had been filed with the county at all. The company had simply been operating under verbal authorization from Carol. Worse, Everclean's business license had been suspended 6 months earlier due to a pending civil suit involving price gouging in another subdivision. "This isn't just a community dispute anymore," Adam said. "This is entering criminal territory." He asked to meet with me and a few neighbors to gather more evidence. We scheduled it for Saturday morning at my place. Friday night, as I was reviewing my notes in the garage, I heard a metallic clatter from the side yard. I stepped outside and found my Ridgeway bin tipped over, contents strewn across the gravel. At first I thought it was raccoons until I noticed the boot prints in the soft dirt nearby. Large ones. Fresh. I checked my security footage. Sure enough, around 11:47 p.m., a figure in a hoodie had crept into the side yard, shoved the bin over, and kicked it twice. The grainy footage caught the outline of a wristwatch and a familiar limp in their gait. I didn't need facial recognition to know who it was. Greg, the vice president of the HOA, Carol's drinking buddy and her go-to enforcer. I sent the clip to Adam, who replied with a one-line message: "Preserve the original." "We'll need it." Saturday morning looked like a neighborhood barbecue, except everyone was holding folders and looking mildly furious. Adam arrived with a clipboard, a badge, and a notepad. Over the next hour, he took statements, reviewed evidence, and confirmed that at least 9 households had been misled into paying fees directly to Carol, none of which had been recorded in HOA financial disclosures. "This is textbook embezzlement," he said, shaking his head. "And if that company's operating without a license, we're looking at multiple levels of liability." By Monday, subpoenas had been issued. The county froze the HOA's bank account pending investigation, and Carol was served with a cease and desist from contacting residents. Greg was warned to stay off other people's property or risk trespassing charges. The neighborhood was buzzing not with panic, but with something else. Relief. People started asking questions, pulling old emails, finding receipts. Turns out Carol had been running similar little side arrangements for years: extra lawn inspection fees, fake citations for unapproved paint colors, and even a pet registration program that no one could remember approving. The dam had finally broken. And I hadn't even gotten to the best part yet, because tucked inside the HOA's last annual report, which I got my hands on through a public records request, was a line item labeled Community Beautification Incentive. A $10,000 payout, issued the same week Carol's ever-clean bin arrived. Guess whose name was on the disbursement check? By Tuesday morning, Carol's front porch looked like a crime scene without the tape. The county had dispatched 2 auditors to collect HOA financial records, and the officers standing by the walkway weren't just for show. One of them, a tall woman with a clipboard and a badge clipped to her belt, introduced herself as Detective Lena Ortiz, White Collar Crimes Division. She knocked. No one answered. After 5 minutes, she turned to one of the auditors and said, "She's got until noon." Then we escalate. From my driveway, I watched it all unfold with a kind of quiet satisfaction. I wasn't alone. A few neighbors came out to water their lawns at the same time. Others walked their dogs a little slower than usual. No one said it out loud, but we were all waiting for the same thing. At exactly 12:23, Carol opened her door just enough to stick her head out. Hair half done, sunglasses on despite the clouds, and a robe that looked like it hadn't been washed since the HOA's last Easter brunch. "You have a warrant?" she asked, voice sharp but shaky. Ortiz flipped a folder open. "We have a judicial order to seize all HOA financial records, both digital and physical. You were served notice yesterday." Carol hesitated. "If you refuse, we'll obtain an access order. It'll be your door." That got her moving. The auditors followed her inside, and the rest of us went back to pretending we had something else to do. I didn't need to stick around. My part was done for now, but I had a feeling things were about to snowball. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was one of the county investigators, someone from the fraud division named Callahan. He wanted to meet the next morning, not at my house at the county courthouse. When I arrived, he was already waiting in a small conference room. Mid-40s, clean shave, suit that looked federal even if he wasn't. A large folder sat in front of him, but he didn't open it right away. "We've gone through the HOA's books," he said. "There's more here than we expected." He slid a printed spreadsheet across the table. I recognized the format. It was the HOA's expense ledger, but this one had sections highlighted in green, yellow, and red. The green entries are legitimate: lawn maintenance, street lighting, seasonal decorations. The yellow ones are questionable event planning, restaurant reimbursements, things that could go either way depending on board approval. He tapped the red column with his pen. "These are fraudulent. Personal purchases, unapproved disbursements, and payments to fictitious vendors." I leaned closer. One line caught my eye immediately: "JCM Consulting $5,000 per quarter." I read aloud. "That's not a contractor we've ever had." "No, it's not. It's a shell entity. Registered to an address that doesn't exist, but the account it routes to, that's Carol Mattingly's." I sat back. "You're saying she's been funneling HOA dues into a fake company? For 3 years. He opened the folder and laid out more documents: bank statements, email printouts, and a copy of a lease agreement for a storage unit in her name. "We executed a search warrant at this unit last night. Found unfiled violation notices, blank fine sheets, and over 20 pre-written letters threatening legal action, all with forged signatures from board members who never consented." I looked down the list. Some of the names were people who had moved away years ago. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "You started this. You've got community trust. We need you to help us make this public, but without causing a panic. We're building a case, but we also need to protect residents from further harm." I nodded. Say no more. By that weekend, an emergency community meeting had been called not by the HOA but by the county. It was held at the local rec center and every seat was filled. People stood in the back, some brought folding chairs. The air buzzed with tension but also curiosity. Detective Ortiz took the mic first. For those of you who don't know me, I'm part of the task force investigating financial misconduct tied to your neighborhood association. We're here to provide transparency, answer questions, and offer support. She laid it out plainly. Carol was under investigation for embezzlement, fraud, and obstruction. Greg, her second-in-command, had been caught on camera tampering with property, a misdemeanor that became a felony once it was tied to an intimidation pattern. Then Callahan stepped up. We've frozen the HOA accounts. No dues will be collected until a temporary board is elected. Anyone who paid compliance fees directly to board members in cash or money orders, please come forward after this meeting. We'll help you file reimbursement claims. You could feel the mood shift. Fear turned to outrage, then to action. People lined up to tell their stories. A nurse who'd been fined for unsanitary waste practices after missing trash day during a double shift. A retired teacher who paid a bin replacement fee for a container that was never delivered. A young couple who'd been denied access to community amenities for questioning HOA decisions. Each story chipped away at the illusion of control the HOA had created. Eventually, it was my turn to speak. I've lived here 12 years. This community used to be about neighbors, not control. But when rules become tools for profit, something breaks. This isn't just financial, it's personal. We deserve better. Afterward, 3 residents approached me about forming a legal committee and interim group to liaise with the county and oversee the HOA's restructuring. I agreed, but only under one condition: complete transparency, no closed-door meetings, no executive votes, everything documented. Everything public. Over the next 2 weeks, Carol's world unraveled. Investigators discovered she'd used HOA funds to pay for hotel stays in nearby cities, claiming they were for regional compliance conferences that didn't exist. Her personal vehicle had been registered as a community operations expense. Even her ever-clean bin, the gleaming one no one else received, had been paid for twice, once through HOA funds and again with a check endorsed by the fake JCM entity. Greg lawyered up fast. He claimed ignorance, said he was just going along with what Carol told him. But a search of his garage turned up over a dozen unused, ever-clean bins, still wrapped in plastic. The inventory list he kept in a spiral notebook, complete with resident names and status notations, told a different story. The bins had been used as leverage: switch to ever-clean or get fined, pay the upgrade fee or lose pickup. Neighbors began comparing notes. It turned out Carol and Greg had created a fake compliance tier system: gold, silver, and standard. The tiers had no legal basis, but they determined who got letters, who got warnings, and who mysteriously had their landscaping cited 3 times in 1 month. When the county filed formal charges, they included conspiracy to defraud, falsification of public records, and theft by deception. Carol was taken into custody without incident. Greg turned himself in the next morning. We held a community potluck 2 days later. Not to celebrate anyone's downfall, but to reclaim the space. Someone brought a speaker and played old Motown. Kids chalked the sidewalks. I grilled burgers. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid to talk about what was broken. By the end of the month, we had a new interim board. People from different backgrounds: a plumber, a librarian, a retired Air Force mechanic, and a teacher who ran the local chess club. No one with a personal agenda, just people who wanted to restore trust. The ever-clean contract was voided. Ridgeway stayed on. And all residents were refunded any unauthorized compliance fees through a restitution fund, supported by a civil penalty levied against Carol's seized assets. On paper, it looked like a victory. But to us, it was more than that. It was proof that power only works when people stay silent. We didn't, and they couldn't touch us again. The new board didn't waste time. Within a week of being voted in, they passed a motion to conduct a full audit, an independent one this time, overseen by a third-party firm from outside the county. They wanted every transaction reviewed, every meeting minute cross-checked, every policy re-evaluated. And they made it clear, no one involved in the previous administration would have access to the process. I was brought in early as a community liaison not because I wanted a title, but because I'd already laid the groundwork. The investigation was still unfolding at the county level, but with the HOA's internal records now in neutral hands, we had an opportunity to dig deeper than the county could. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted to make sure there was no room for anything like this to happen again. The forensic auditors came back with findings that made even the seasoned board members shake their heads. There had been unauthorized withdrawals from the reserve fund money earmarked for roof repairs and sidewalk leveling that had been routed through a small business account listed under an LLC called Greenview Solutions. That name hadn't popped up before, not even in the county's initial sweep. But the address, it matched a rented P.O. box 2 towns over. A deeper check revealed that the LLC was registered under Greg's cousin's name. When the auditors requested bank records, law enforcement got involved again. This time, they looped in the state attorney's office. Detective Ortiz returned, this time in plainclothes. She asked to speak with me privately, away from the community center where the board now met. "We've been watching the financials on Greenview Solutions," she said, as we sat on a bench behind the library. Turns out they weren't just funneling HOA money. They were laundering it through sham landscaping services and inflated maintenance invoices. I frowned. That wasn't in the county report. It wouldn't be. This crosses into felony territory, wire fraud, tax evasion. Possibly even racketeering if we can tie in the third-party vendors who signed off on the invoices. I leaned back, watching a group of kids race scooters across the path. So what happens next? We're preparing a grand jury presentation, and we'll need community testimony. Not just about the trash scam, about everything. The patterns, the pressure tactics, the threats. The more consistent the timeline, the stronger the case. I agreed, and so did several others. Over the next month, we gave sworn statements. The board organized a secure drop point for any past residents who'd moved away but still kept documentation, old emails, letters, even voice messages. One woman who'd left 2 years earlier still had a voicemail from Carol threatening to initiate lien procedures for a payment that had already cleared. The grand jury convened in early spring. I wasn't in the courtroom, but the prosecutor's office kept us updated. After 5 days of testimony, 22 indictments were handed down. Carol and Greg faced the bulk of them, but 2 other former board members were charged as well, one for falsifying meeting minutes to show fake vote results, the other for filing insurance claims on non-existent repairs. The community finally saw what had been happening behind closed doors for years. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules, it had become a machine designed to extract as much money as possible from the residents and funnel it into a private network of payouts and kickbacks. The civil suit came next. A class action brought by over 30 homeowners, including me. The damages sought weren't astronomical, but they were specific. Restitution for improper fees, repair costs due to deferred maintenance, and emotional distress caused by harassment and false citations. Carol's defense team tried to argue that everything had been within the interpretive authority of the board. But the state's forensic evidence blew that apart. Emails recovered from a cloud backup, yes. She'd forgotten to delete her auto-sync, showed her explicitly instructing Greg to create pressure points against residents who hadn't switched to Everclean. One message even included a list titled non-compliant targets with names, addresses, and leverage notes. Greg's messages were worse. He'd sent photos of residents' yards to Everclean representatives, suggesting which households might be converted with strategic fines. One email ended with, "We'll get them on board one way or another." The judge didn't need long. Carol and Greg were convicted on multiple counts, including fraud, conspiracy, and misuse of public funds. Carol received a sentence of 6 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole in 4. Greg got 3.5, plus a restitution order requiring the sale of his home to repay stolen funds. The other 2 former board members took plea deals in exchange for testifying. They were barred from holding any fiduciary position in a registered organization for 10 years. Once the dust settled, the new board took the next step, amending the bylaws. With legal counsel and community input, they implemented a series of reforms. No more bulk contracts without a resident-wide vote. All board meetings recorded and archived online. Financial statements published quarterly and available to any resident on request. And most importantly, term limits. No one could serve more than 2 consecutive terms. People started to breathe again. I noticed it in the way neighbors waved without hesitation. The way kids played in front yards instead of being ushered inside when someone walked past. The way nobody flinched when a board member came by to check on a project. We even had a neighborhood cleanup weekend, not because anyone was threatened with fines, but because people finally felt like the community was theirs again. At the end of it all, I went back to living my life. No more meetings. No more investigations. Just peace, the kind I hadn't realized was missing until it returned. One morning, I opened my front door to see a note on my trash bin. It just said, "Thanks for not backing down." No name, no signature, just that. I folded it up and tucked it into the back of my toolbox. Not because I needed a reminder of what had happened, but because it was proof that standing up, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, means something. It meant everything.